Looks like we're started.
Yes.
Looks good for me. Good for you, Jessie.
Good for me.
Okay, great. Welcome to Worldhoppers. This is a collaborative channel. You're going to be seeing us four a lot. We'll introduce ourselves in a second, but this particular channel is dedicated to donating any AdSense revenue, sales from merch, those sorts of things to charity. It's just a bunch of geeky nerds getting together, talking about books. And today's video, we're going to be doing the Booktube Newbie Tag, so you get to know us a little bit better, but I'll let everybody introduce themselves. Jade, if you want to start.
Sure. My name is Jade, and I have a Booktube channel called Bedtime Bookworm, where I talk about books. I talk about what I want to read, what I am reading, what I have read. I read a wide variety of genres, mostly SFF, but also some like thrillers, historical fiction, horror, a little bit of everything.
My turn.
Jashana, you go next.
Okay. I'm Jashana. My channel is also titled Jashana. I've been on Booktube for a little over 3 years and also largely talk about fantasy, but I do also read a decent amount of historical fiction, not very much sci-fi, and a little bit of contemporary, but mostly fantasy.
And then, hi, my name's Jessie. I'm from the channel Jessie May. I've been on Booktube for a little over a year now, and I talk about fantasy, sci-fi, horror, thriller, contemporary books, a little bit of everything. I'll try anything, young adult, but mostly fantasy.
And then I'm Elle from Elliot Brooks, and you could tell I pretty much only read fantasy, but I like to mix it up here and there, but that's the primary one. But the Booktube Newbie Tag is generally a tag that you do to get to know the individual booktuber, but this is going to be where you get to know us, and then you get to know the channel itself a little bit better. And I think, Jade, you have the questions that can pop up, right?
Oh, yep. Let me click on the first one. It's a good question. Why did you start this channel?
Yeah, so we talked about that a little bit at the beginning. It's a way to kind of be a celebration of BookTube and bring a bunch of people together, because most of us, the reason we're here is to talk about books, whether you watch or you film. And so this is kind of a way for all of us to come together and get to talk to each other, and then you guys get to kind of join in as well. And it just seems like a fun way to raise money for charities. We just talk about books. It's like the easiest thing ever.
Well, we do all the time anyway.
So the four of us are friends, and a lot of the times we send each other messages, and it's like, well, we might as well, if we can make money from our messages, basically, and then entertain some people along the way, and help out some charities. Seems like a good deal to me. So
yeah, definitely.
Way too many of my days, I'm like, I haven't done anything today. I've just talked to my friends.
Those are the best days. Okay, the next question is, what are some fun and unique things that you can bring to Booktube? And I'm really excited about this question because I think that there's a lot of unique things that we're going to be doing on this channel, a lot of video ideas that we have been percolating that I really haven't seen anywhere else on YouTube or on Booktube. So I'm very excited for some of the videos that we have coming.
Yeah, I'm especially excited for some of our games
yes.
that we have planned. Some
yeah, there's kinds of videos that you can't do alone. Those I think will be fun and unique that we can bring.
Yeah, and I think having just a bunch of different faces is going to be really cool too. Like having it be kind of like a little community corner of BookTube.
Mm-hmm.
Where you'll see all kinds of different people talking about these things all the time.
Yeah, and I feel like we all kind of have slightly different corners of BookTube that we have friends in. So we're all going to be able to like introduce each other to our friends, and it's going to be so much fun.
Yeah.
I think just in general too, sometimes we feel very similarly about books and we geek out about them, and then other times we don't. Like Jashana and I recently just read a book, The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh. And ironically, because I don't publicly rate books, which is not a topic we need to get into, but I don't publicly really rate books, but Jashana does. And we were talking about what we would, theoretically rate the book. We both would have rated it the same, but I didn't like it and she did. So it was kind of funny.
So funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that will be a fun thing we talk about eventually too, is how different rating scales go for people and stuff. But just
Yeah.
the
Oh,
idea
yeah.
that
Always very interesting.
yeah, you can have such drastically different opinions about something for one book, and then you can feel exactly the same about another. I just think it's really fun. And I'm trying to think right now, besides just that, like Jade really likes Wheel of Time, and I don't. And then there's just been a few times where we were actually, so we'll have, if you guys know Alan from Library of Alexandria, him and Jessie just really battled it out yesterday talking about Lord of the Rings versus The Hobbit. Oh my
He hates hobbits. How do you hate hobbits? It's like hating puppies.
He hates Sam. Sam is the worst character. So stuff like that, like how you know. So
how people have different opinions.
Yes, and being able to broadcast that rather than, I think on our own individual channels, a lot of times we do those videos where we ask people to submit unpopular opinions or hot takes or roasts or things like that. But it's still like you reacting to those versus reacting as a group. I think it's going to be really fun, or even just reacting to each other.
Yes.
I think it's going to be really fun.
Yeah.
And then question 3, right?
Yeah.
Oh, well, we kind of answered that too.
Yeah, that's true. We already kind of talked about that. I'm excited for all the fun things we're going to do and just like sharing our opinions. And
I'm excited for merch.
oh, I'm so bummed that my merch isn't here yet. I wanted to wear it in this video. And it's like sucks extra because the post said it was going to be here on time. And if they from the beginning said it wasn't going to be here tomorrow and wouldn't have gotten my hopes up, like that's fine. But they said it was going to be here yesterday. So, but I'm excited for the merch too. I'm going to be wearing it all the time.
This shirt is so comfortable. I think everybody, now that so many of us can't go out, we are living in our pajamas. Or athleisure or whatever it's called. I feel like so. Like right now, I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt. I don't know. I feel like I never really get dressed anymore.
I don't.
Same.
So that's what merch can be for, is to just embrace the like casual.
Embrace the new lifestyle.
Stay-at-home lifestyle. Okay. Why do you love reading?
Do we want to go first, Jessie? Do you want to start this one?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, reading, and especially reading fantasy, it's just an escape, right? You can just escape into totally different worlds where anything's possible. I love exploring people's imaginations and just magic systems and rooting for these characters that you can just somehow find little nuggets of them that you relate to. I just love reading fantasy for that reason, and kind of sci-fi along those same lines. So I think any fantasy reader can really relate to just wanting to escape into an imagination that completely takes you to a different world.
Yeah, I really agree. Yeah.
Great answer.
I don't have anything else to add. I feel like that was perfect. I mean, and sometimes life can be such a bummer, like stuff happens, like, this sucks. And then you're like, I'm going to read something. Sometimes you want to read something light and fluffy to just kind of help you kind of get out of that. And then other times you're like, this sucks and misery loves company. So I want to read about a sucky situation.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of times I want to read like about people having a harder time than I am. Like people, that's why I like to read fantasy, because usually they're like battling and doing all kinds of things that I don't have to worry about, getting into politics and stuff. But it's definitely escapism for me too. And also I think more so for sci-fi, I like kind of exploring like the what ifs, like what if this, was how society was, or what if this happened, like an apocalypse, what would life be like? So I like exploring all the what ifs too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And it's like, I love fantasy for, like, I will get wrapped up in the mythology and lore of an entirely made up world. My Game of Thrones Ice and Fire book back here. Like, it's like literal history textbooks about a made up world. And like, I just love it because I love the world. And I feel like that's always what I'm like reaching for when I'm reading fantasy is like getting wrapped up in it like that and like really caring and like being able to like debate with people on this made up crap. It's not real, but I'm so invested.
And the magic too, I feel like. Same thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fun.
Okay, next question. What book, excuse me, what book or series got you into reading? And I was just saying before we started this live stream that I feel like this question is a little bit silly just because a lot of us, I think, start reading when we're really young. And like, I'm not sure how relevant of a question that is for some of us, but I'll go ahead and go first. The first like series I remember really loving and wanting more, and like I read one after the other was the Little House on the Prairie books by Laura Ingalls Wilder. I read those like when I was in 2nd grade and I loved them.
Oh, that's precious.
I liked those too. But yeah, I really liked a lot of little chapter books series when I was, in 1st grade, 2nd grade, whatever. Boxcar Children, I read that all the time. I didn't read Goosebumps because I was scared.
I definitely read
just random scholastic chapter books. I just was eating them up. I don't know. Those Mandy in the Attic or something. Oh man, I've never heard of them. Yeah, I don't know, just random little chapter books like that.
That's awesome. Yeah, Magic Treehouse is another one that I ate that up, especially since I think the first installment in that huge series was about dinosaurs. Like as a kid, I was just obsessed with dinosaurs. So I was like, oh, this is great. A fantasy world about dinosaurs. Like, yes, give it to me. So I love Magic Treehouse too.
Yeah, and did you guys ever read Artemis Fowl?
I read the first one, and then I didn't continue. I don't know why.
I know there's like all these bad adaptations now. Yeah. I remember really liking Artemis Fowl. I really liked Alex Rider, where it's not fantasy. I mean, he's like a kid spy or something. And I remember even as a kid being like, this is stupid. Like the premise. And I had a friend, and he was like, I know it sounds dumb, but you got to read it. And I remember starting and being like, oh, dang, this is really good. Like, even as a kid, I thought it sounded stupid. But it was, I remember really liking it. And I think that author actually writes adult books now too. So I kind of want to try and see what the books are like. And the Bartimaeus trilogy, I really liked that one. I know Jade likes that too.
Yeah, I read it as an adult, but yeah, I really liked it.
Yeah. So I always say this question, I have always said that I liked books too, and a lot of the ones we're talking about. But the thing that really hit me, like the first time I was ever really hit by a story was not a book, and it was a video game, and it was Final Fantasy X. And it was just like, I just remember playing that game and being so absorbed in everything and like the world. And I know obviously the visuals don't count for books, but I was just so sucked into it to the point where I remember it was one of those games where you have to wait till you get to a save point to save it. It's not like an autosave feature. And my sister and I had just beat this boss that was really hard to us. Going back and playing it, I was like, wow, we sucked because it was so easy. But we had finally beat it. We were so excited. And my mom came in and heard us all happy. I've told the story before, so sorry for people that have heard it. But she came in and she's like, what's going on, girls? And she hit the light switch. And the light switch is what our PlayStation was plugged into. And it just went black. And my sister and I were like, no, Mom. She was like,
Mom fail.
We weren't really like mad at my mom. We were just like, no, because it had taken us so long. And then I remember, this is such a side tangent, but I remember my sister, like, because she was the one, she was older than me, 5 years older. So she would usually play video games, and then she would hand me the remote when she got to a hard spot or a scary spot. And I'm like, I'm like 5. Why are you giving it to me? But like, for example, the Tomb Raider games, whenever you'd get to like a new cave area, she'd be like, I don't want to do it, you do it. And there was one time she handed me the remote, and it's dinosaur, because we were talking about dinosaurs, like a giant T-Rex came out. And I got freaked out, threw the remote and hit the TV, and it didn't break. But Final Fantasy, I remember being like, I'm gonna beat that boss for Sissy before she comes home. And I was like playing, and I did beat it, but then it didn't let me save. It had like so many more other things to fight. I'm like, I don't know what to do now. So I just watched it for hours until my sister came home, and I'm like, I beat it for you. But anyway, I clearly have all these memories of this stupid video game. I love it so much. I'm trying to get Jessie to play it.
I know, I gotta play it.
Oh, it's so fun.
So good.
I still haven't finished it. I'm like 85% through Final Fantasy X. I never finished it.
Avoided spoilers?
Yes, but I have a guess at what happens, but I have avoided spoilers, yes.
Okay, good.
Speaking of you being super emotional about something, I totally remember the first time my mom walked in on me sobbing over a book. I think I was in the 3rd grade, and I was reading Where the Red Fern Grows. Have you guys read that? Oh my God. I was sobbing, and my mom walked in and she freaked out. She was like, what's wrong? Like, she really thought something was terrible. And I was like, whoa, I don't want I just like was crying so hard. That was probably the first book I got super emotional about.
Aww.
And I think the first like thing that got me into fantasy was the Redwall books. Did anybody else read those?
Is that the one with the little mouse on them?
One of my coworkers, well, he's not a coworker anymore, but I think I still have the book. He gave it to me a couple years ago. It was like, I think you would love it. And then I just never,
totally middle grade.
never picked it up. Yeah, I know. He told me that too.
Okay, good. Yeah. I want to reread them. I haven't read them literally since I was like in elementary school, but I hear they hold up decently well to reread as an adult. So I definitely want to try that sometime. But I think those were the first books that really got me into fantasy. And there's like kind of like battles and stuff like that. And I really like reading about battles and like strategy around battles for some reason. I chalk it all up to Redwall.
Yeah,
go ahead.
The first like series that got me into fantasy I recently talked about, and that was the Sookie Stackhouse.
Yes.
You have over here to unhaul after that reread. But yeah, it does have a special place in my heart, because before that I've always been an avid reader, and I read like when I was a kid there were certain books I'm sure that were fantasy like young readers and fantasy middle grades, but like I wasn't like a fantasy reader. I didn't read Harry Potter. I don't know if Artemis Fowl is even fantasy. Is it? I don't know. But like all these things, the freaking, what is it? The Golden Compass or the?
Oh yeah. The Golden Compass.
That whole thing. Yeah. I never read those. Like I just wasn't really into fantasy.
Oh, I read those.
And even in my adulthood, like I read like just general fiction, I guess. And like random literary fiction and some sci-fi, but not really. Only for school. And then, I randomly picked those up. And then I just...
Wait, so how old were you when you started reading fantasy?
Like 23, 24.
Wow.
Yeah. And at first it was all like paranormal. I'm like, where's the vampires making out with people?
Right.
And then I just kind of slowly got into all the rest of it. So,
nice. Did y'all ever read The Prophecy of the Stones?
I don't think
Does
so.
that ring a bell? Oh my gosh. It was this middle grade book. And I looked at the reviews on Goodreads recently because I was curious. It's like a 3.0 on Goodreads. Not good. But it was written by a 17-year-old. And I thought, as little 8-year-old Jessie thought that was the coolest thing ever, that this teenager wrote this amazing book. And I used to sit and make like screenplays of this book and be like, if I was cast as this character, these would be my lines.
I love it.
Well, when I was in middle school and I was still reading Redwall, it was when we had dial-up internet, and there were these things called message boards where you can talk to people who are on the message board at the same time, kind of like a chat room, but way slower. And you have like different posts. And I used to role play doing Redwall characters. Like I'd make my own character, and then like the message board was like this tavern that you walk into, and I'd be like, Silvertail, because I was a squirrel, walks into the tavern and takes a seat, and then you like sit there and wait until someone responds, and they're like, oh my God. I was like role playing. It was, I know I sound really old right now, but it was so much fun, and I just
love this.
That's so
God. I love it so much.
On the internet, but it was so fun.
It's like online gaming now, basically.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
cool.
Lots slower, but yeah.
Very slow.
So I have two things. One, I don't want to forget because you brought up Redwall again. I had this weird thing as a kid where if the main characters weren't humans, but they were some kind of animal, I'm like, but like they're animals. Like I just, for whatever reason, I had this wall in my head, Redwall. But I don't know what it was because I'm like, it's like a mouse, right? And people be like, yeah, but it's good. And I'm like, yeah, but it's a mouse.
And they're all like woodland creatures. There's like squirrels and the character I made was like a ninja squirrel, like a spy she was like Inej.
I love it.
It's funny too because I feel like since I love Final Fantasy, there's like weird not people creatures in that game. There's like rabbit people and
yeah. And you didn't blink an eye at that.
Did you like movies like that when you were a kid? Like Disney movies with animals talking?
I mean, I know we watched The Land Before Time 1,000 times or something. Like, I know that was, I don't remember if it was my sister or me that was obsessed, but I always would watch whatever she was watching. But like, I loved Mulan as a kid, but that's
like The Secret of Nim? Anybody
I
watch
watched that book when I was a kid and I liked it.
Oh, that movie, was my favorite. It was so scary though. So scary. Oh my God. So creepy.
I did read the one kind of more of this is getting into fantasy sort of reading was the Lioness Rampant series by Tamora Pierce. It was, I remember it being really good. It was, she has a twin brother and the boys go to basically military school and the girls go, I think, to magic school and they swap places or something. And she's disguised as a boy. And so anyway, I apparently really like stories where girls are disguised as boys. But
hey, that's a trope I like too.
Yeah, so I really liked that series. I think it was a quartet. And then there was another series she wrote and it was the same world, which is really cool because I feel like people think this is a brand new original concept or that it only happens in comics. But it was, I mean, Tamora Pierce was doing it then. She had a character who had like animal magic. And that character, chronologically, that story takes place after the events of the first one. So the girl in the first one, where she ends up, you like know about her, which is pretty cool. And I think they interact a couple times. And there might even be battles and stuff in that one too. But I remember I thought it was really cool. I totally want to go back and reread those at some point. They just always have, I liked the original covers, or at least the covers I remember. And I feel like they kind of made them look more middle school because I'm pretty sure one of them has like a horse head on the cover. I don't know.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. I really want to read those. I've heard Tamora Pierce is great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember really liking
I haven't
those.
read her either. There's a lot of things that I read growing up that I want to revisit, but I'm also nervous because I don't know if they'll still be good.
Yeah, the Sookie situation.
Yeah. That was the whole thing. Most of the time when I reread, because I reread a lot of my like childhood books because I have them now from my parents' house, and like it'll be a different reading, especially like the early reader ones where I'm like, why did I love this? So this is like the most basic thing ever, but like it's supposed to be. It's for literal elementary school kids. Yeah. But like I don't know, it's always like fun just to be like, oh, I love this, even if I don't really think it's great as an adult. Like it's like I remember the feeling of when I read it as a kid.
I really want to go back and reread the Wayside Stories books.
Oh,
I remember. I read
like
one
the janitor, like that. Those ones, like Santa Claus is the janitor or whatever the frick.
So like, there's a whole floor that's missing, and there's one of the chapters as a kid ends up on the missing floor, or something like really weird stuff, and really funny though. And I remember like. I think there's a character, their whole plot lines are basically like the ridiculousness of Kenny from South Park. Like there's always really weird stuff happening, but they're for kids and they're funny and they're not scary, but they're very bizarre. And I remember thinking they were the funniest thing ever. And then my mom used to love when I read Junie B. Jones to her, which I know isn't fantasy, but she would crack up reading when I would read those books to her. She thought Junie B. Jones was the funniest character ever. It's cute now because we bought those books for my nieces, and it's cute to know like, oh, now she gets to be like grandma with Junie B. Jones again. But like my nieces, my mom was like reading Junie B. Jones to them, and she was like dying laughing. They're just looking at her like, grandma's weird.
I was thinking of The Adventures of the Bailey School Kids.
Okay.
Vampires don't wear polka dots. Santa Claus doesn't mop floors. Aliens don't wear braces. Like they're all these.
Now I need to go look these up.
Oh man, they were so fun. It was like the janitor was Santa Claus, but like, was he though? I don't know. It was like that's all I really remember.
I know I've talked about this with Jashana and Jade, but Jessie, I don't know if you know, there's this one book series that I read that had the most beautiful illustrations, and it was my first, I feel like, entry into a sad story. Jade, do you already know?
I can't stop laughing.
Oh no.
It's a story about like this baby horse, and the mama horse is like, don't go by the waterfall, it's slippery over there. And the baby horse is like, I'm gonna go by the waterfall because it's fine. And then it slips and it falls. And then it's like looking up and it just sees like its mom and all the other horses up there, and it's all sad. And then a unicorn comes, or I think it's a unicorn or a Pegasus. And it comes, it's like, you can't get back up there, but you're coming with me now and I'll help you. And he's like, okay. Or she, I can't remember if it was a boy or a girl baby horse. But then like growing up, it's like, oh shoot, it like died and went to heaven. I think it's like that book. But it was because I remember reading it and being like, you can't get back to its mom. That's so sad. And then being like, I really like this. I don't know why. My mom hates anything sad. She hates sad movies. She only ever wants to watch funny shows, funny movies. And she's like, why do you like this? Like she just it's really sad. I think she was afraid that she ruined me. She's like, I think I broke my daughter. Like this.
Oh, I love it.
Jesse, your face was priceless watching your reactions.
A unicorn comes on.
You were, yeah. You're very surprised.
Well, and Jessie, you're like, because for those that don't know, Jessie used to work for Disney. And I just feel like, oh, just like a little Disney princess. I feel like we're opposites in that you're like this happy. You were Chippendale, right? Or
Yeah, I was Chippendale.
you were
Oh
friends,
my
right?
god, I love this. I did not know that.
I didn't
So I'm very like animated. Like, let's play charades.
Oh my god, I love it. Fun.
Okay. I think we talked about this question pretty well.
Yeah, good on that.
I want to add really quick that Jessie did a whole video recommending books to Disney characters, right?
I did. Yes.
That sounds fun.
We'll link that and Jashana's Sookie rant.
Okay. What questions would you ask your favorite booktubers? And we decided we're going to ask each other questions. Someone want to go first?
I'll start. So I'm going to ask Jade, because I know a lot of people watching are also excited for this, which is just anything for Wheel of Time, the adaptation. Are you excited? Are you nervous? What are your thoughts on the casting? Whatever you want to say, just your thoughts or what's your number one thing you're excited about or nervous about? Just something to do with the Wheel of Time adaptation.
I'm just excited that it's like actually happening, because there were rumors of a movie for years, and like they even did like a pilot episode that was like not great and nobody liked it. And so, I mean, I am a little bit nervous, but everything that I've seen so far, like as far as the pictures and the casting and like the people who are involved in the show seem to be like really big fans. And I think that makes all the difference, having fans involved in making a show. And so I know that things are like, they're gonna have to change things. I mean, I think they possibly could change things for the better, like pacing wise for the series, and they're gonna have to cut some things out, but like, I'm okay with that. I just want them to do a good job, which I really think that they will. And I also just want to, bring in new people to the fandom, people who've never heard of it. And then like after they watch the show and they get really into it, then they'll go read the books and then they'll be fans with us and it'll be so much fun. I'm pretty sure I'm going to cry like when I first watch it. So I'm so excited.
So for those that don't know, I'm a big Witcher fan, but my first introduction to it was the games, despite the fact the books came first, which is true of, I think, a lot of people. And when they made the adaptation, I will say, while I didn't love the Netflix show, I did weirdly like that because it became more mainstream, the fandom got nicer from my experience. Because when I first started making Booktube videos, it was mostly a lot of Witcher content. And I've had to take so many Witcher videos down because I would get
so sad
gross comments or really like racist or really sexist comments. And I was like, gosh darn it, this fandom. And it was so frustrating to love something so much. And then to be like, why do you also love this so much?
So sad.
But then when the show, more people were getting into the books, and I think a lot of booktubers are really nice. And then weirdly, because it's become more mainstream, I think it's just introduced, just like, Netflix. People who watch Netflix, which is a lot of people, to this fantasy show, which I think has been really fun. So hopefully, the Wheel of Time fandom, I don't think is as bad as the Witcher fandom by any means.
We don't have that video game aspect. I feel like the video game fandoms can be a little bit toxic sometimes. At least that's what I hear from my husband.
They're icky. That's the nicest way to put it. They can be very icky. But
there are definitely fans who are really hardcore about Wheel of Time.
The dogs.
They can be really hardcore about Wheel of Time, and I think it'll bring in some more people who are a little more relaxed, which will be good.
Yeah, Jade has, and that actually we'll link this. Jade has kind of a tips to get into Wheel of Time video. And do you mind if I mention the one thing that is always brought up? So
go ahead.
So she mentions in the video that Wheel of Time, it's not super explicit, and it's not so dense and abstract in its writing that it's inaccessible for younger audiences. In fact, a lot of Wheel of Time fans started reading it when they were younger and kind of grew up reading the books. And so she basically says you can see it as a young adult type of book. Not saying it is young adult really, but that it's appropriate, right? Young adult.
Yeah,
reading.
I was basically saying that if you're 15 or 17, don't be scared to read it. There's nothing in it that you can't read. And I'm saying that they can read it, and I got so many comments that the one thing they disagree with me on is that Wheel of Time is YA, and how could I ever say that? How could I be a true fan if I consider that? And I'm just you guys are dumb. That's not what I said.
What's funny is it was published as young adult for a little bit.
Yeah, actually, the very first, they split it into 2 books and published it as YA at one point. So even the publishers think that YA people can read it. YA people. Sorry, my dogs.
How dare the dogs? Do you want to ask Jashana now? Oh, okay.
And the dog.
Oh, there's a doggy.
I've got one outside barking, so then this one is trying to bark at the other one. But if I hold her, she'll be quiet. Okay, Jashana, as someone who likes to read classics, meaning you, what advice would you give to someone who doesn't read classics, meaning me? Where should I start, or what do you like about them? Any advice?
I feel with classics, I would try to start with not novellas, because there's quite a few, and certain classics authors that will have shorter works. And I would just try to get into those. And I don't know, because the writing styles can be so dang different, where it can be really dense and difficult to understand, and this old English, what is even happening? And then there's I think Jane Austen is more accessible in just her writing style. It's more easier to understand for us. But even that, I would probably say to start with, novellas, because it's a whole different style of storytelling. It can be weird to get into. It's so much slower, typically, I think.
Right.
At least what I've read. I haven't read all the classics by any means.
Right.
Because the storytelling is just a lot slower. A lot of it is more the mundane, interpersonal, what he said at tea yesterday and how I felt about it. And what my friend thinks of his temperament, and is he good marriage material, and whatever. Even with classics, there's those types Jane Austen. It's romance centered and just a guy and a girl liking each other, and are they gonna get together? And then there's Frankenstein and Dracula and stuff like that. So I don't know. Yeah, I would just say whatever. For someone getting into it, just try something shorter at first. And don't be discouraged if you read one that you're nope. Because I find that I'm very hit or miss with classics. There's some where I'm even Jane Austen, I've DNF'd some of her works where I'm I don't know, this is not doing it for me. And then some that I just love, so.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. All right, now I have to ask a question. I don't know what to ask.
I'm like trying to think.
Me too. The real question I want to ask you is, when are you going to read City of Girls? Because I just saw on your holiday.
I saw it at my used bookstore and was like, oh my God, I'm grabbing it now.
I would say actually, so on that note, because I know you do like historical fiction as well. What thus far has been like your favorite historical fiction that you've read?
Yeah, my favorite historical fiction was actually my first historical fiction that I read, which was The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I think that book can be enjoyed by anyone, even if you don't like historical fiction typically, just because it's such a compelling story. I mean, my goodness, it definitely is faster paced once you kind of get past the first initial bit of it. But then, I mean, the characters, it's about these two sisters during World War II who have very different paths in the war, but are struggling to fight in their own ways. And it's beautiful. It made me cry. That's definitely my favorite so far. So have any of you read it
a couple years ago and I loved it. I loved it so much. What's funny is that the way that it's written, you're not like necessarily supposed to know which sister is which. Do you know what I'm talking about, Jessie?
Yeah.
And I went into it and I just assumed it was one way. And so when in book club, people were saying that they like didn't know who it was. I was like, what are you talking about? It was obviously this person, but like I just guessed right from the beginning, which is really funny. But I love that book.
Yeah, that is interesting. It would make such a good book club book. But I interpreted it, I think, the same way that you did, where I just assumed or guessed the right way initially. Yeah, but it's so good. It's so good.
I've heard really good things about that one. I haven't read it yet, but I want to.
Elle, you're supposed to read it soon, right?
Soon, yeah.
Yeah.
So excited. I hope you don't hate it.
I like
it. I always feel with City of Girls whenever someone's like, I'm going to read it soon. I'm like, yay, but also, oh God. It's okay if you hate it, but I hope you don't.
I know. All right. Elle. Oh man, this is so hard. Okay, I think I know what your answer is going to be, but I think it's just a fun thing to talk about anyway. If you could see any story or book you've ever read adapted into some other form of storytelling, whether that's TV, a video game, a movie, which story would it be and which format would you prefer?
What do you think I'm going to say?
I think you're going to say Mistborn into a movie, but I might be wrong.
Close, into a video game.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it'd be an awesome video game.
It needs to be a video game. I've said it for so long that I used to make the occasional video about movie, show, or game, and I would take books and say, if there was an adaptation, should it be a movie, show, or game? And then I would like plead my case and talk about why I think it should be one or the other. And Mistborn, I feel like they would make great movies. I think they would be good blockbusters. Plus, there's enough. I feel like the stories themselves are not so epic that you can't contain it in a movie. Like some of them, they have to be shows. I don't know why sometimes they try certain stories as movies because I'm like, that's never going to work, right? Like in Wheel of Time, if they'd been like, we're going to make movies, I'd be like, that's a terrible idea. Yeah. So I do think they could work as movies, but I just think it's perfect for the video game. The magic system lends itself so well. And just the way visually that you can see the magic in your head, I feel like it would go into a video game perfectly. Like the gameplay would just write itself, in a sense. Yeah. Like even just the whole way that if you run out of medals, then that's what's going to keep you from being able to use it. Like that's super easy, right? You just show like your medal, like this is bar, almost like how you have MP in a game or HP. This is like the amount that you have of the various medals. And so I think when I was a kid, I actually used to want to make video games. And that obviously is not what I do, but I like think a little too much about like, okay, this is how this would work. And I feel like the setting for anybody who's played Bloodborne, I feel like that could be a great example of what Luthadel could look like. And then for the gameplay itself, as far as visually, especially with like the blue lines, anybody that's played Final Fantasy 15, or I haven't played the Spider-Man games, but similar to that, I just think that visually, that's what it could look like when you're, burning metals and shooting
yeah.
across the sky from building to building. It would be great. I don't know why somebody hasn't done it already. It's perfect.
And you'd get to play Vin, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, that would be really cool as a video game.
That would be such a perfect video game.
And the thing too is I know sometimes like the Lord of the Rings games, you play as random people in the world and not necessarily like I'm Frodo on this mission. So you could potentially just not play as the actual characters. I mean, I think they could easily do that. But they have some flexibility too. They could do their own thing, and I think it'd be fun.
I think that'd be a lot of fun.
I want to add to what an easy way to write sequels, because obviously there's second era Mistborn and it's a different setting. So you can have like Red Dead Redemption type setting for anybody that's played that as like Mistborn era 2.
That'd be cool.
It'd be awesome.
Got it all planned out.
I have way
Thought about this way too much.
I have thought about it too much. Yeah.
Okay, next question. What challenges do you think starting a booktube channel will be the hardest to overcome?
Saying the word overcome. So I think that we're going to answer this for this channel in particular. We do plan to open this up and have this be a very big community effort where we have other people on consistently and stuff. Or sometimes we have people on maybe just for like a special video and we feel like are going to be perfect for it. But I just think scheduling is always going to be tricky when you have multiple people that you have to consider, and things come up, people get sick, people's dogs get sick, or their cars break down, they can't get home, whatever. It's just always little things pop up. So I think scheduling is going to be probably, that's probably it. Otherwise, it's just talking about books.
Yeah, I think it's hard because we have people in different time zones, and if we, invite any international booktubers, like that makes it even harder. So definitely scheduling can be hard.
I'm sorry, I wasn't laughing at you.
I know. You were like,
it's like I feel like a headache coming on, so I'm trying to stop it from happening. But
yeah, massage that neck. Okay, next question. When did you start reading? I'll go first. I started reading pretty young. Like, I remember, I don't know if any of you guys did this, but when I was like 3, 4, 5, I think 4, my dad taught me to read using Hooked on Phonics. Did anybody use Hooked on Phonics?
Yup.
Yup. Yeah. So probably when I was like 4, I started reading using that. I guess that answers the question.
Yeah, I was the same, like 4, 5. I also started writing little stories when I was 4, but I couldn't write yet. So my mom wrote them, but I was like telling her the words and she just would write them. And then I saw my little pictures. They were like little stick figures with their little hands.
You were an author from the beginning.
I was. But yeah, like when I was 4 or 5, I started reading and always had a book.
Same.
Yeah, I think I started reading when I was a kid, but then I got really busy with school and orchestra and other things. So then I would say I got back into reading after college.
Yeah. No, I definitely have had phases. I mean, I think through most of high school, I still read a lot. And then when I got to college, it was like, I don't have time for this. I would read every summer. Like, I would make it a point to kind of read. I read a lot of middle grades during the summer when I was in college. And then I went to grad school and I didn't read. And after grad school is when I discovered like the bookish internet. And I really got back into reading at that point. And that's where BookTube started.
Yeah, I didn't read for like leisure as much during college, but I was going to college for a writing degree. So I had a lot of English.
Yeah.
So I still read a fair amount. I just wasn't reading.
That doesn't count.
Yeah, I was reading novels, but they weren't ones that I was necessarily picking for myself.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I started reading again after college as well. I stopped like in middle school, high school, college. I just didn't read very much. And so when I started reading again, I was reading all of the like YA books that I had missed out on reading in high school and stuff. I was like, oh, look at this. I didn't know there was YA. I was like, this is a whole new world. So that's where I like started reading, and now I just got into like adult fantasy and stuff this year. So I've been reading YA for a while because I'm just like catching up.
That's fun. Yeah, I still feel like there's a lot that I missed out on in those like 6 years where I didn't read very much.
Yep.
Okay, where do you read?
Oh,
I mostly read on my couch or in bed, like before going to bed, like sitting up in bed.
same.
Or at my desk, because during work, like when I have breaks, I'll just like chill in my chair and like kick my feet up on the desk and read for like 10 minutes. But
Smart. Yeah, I'm mostly reading in bed, hence my channel name, Bedtime Bookworm. I like always read before bed, and then if I can read other times during the day, like that's nice, but it's a routine for me. It's how I fall asleep. I have like a Kindle Paperwhite and turn all my lights off, and I read until I get sleepy, and I fall asleep that way. But I've been trying to go to bed like an hour, like get in bed like an hour earlier and read with the lights on for a little bit, because once the lights go off, I only get like 20 minutes in before I fall asleep. So I've been trying to like start reading earlier at night before I start reading from my Kindle, but mostly on the bed. I do read on my couch sometimes, like on the weekends. I do a lot of audiobooks, and when I'm being healthy, I like to walk or run on my treadmill and like listen to books, but it's been since before the pandemic since I did that. So
yeah, I think that brings up a good point too with audiobooks. So I like reading in bed. I like reading on the couch, the usual. I really like reading when the weather is nice, to sit outside and read, because it's like the most peaceful. Like my heart is just so happy being outside, hearing the rustling of leaves and stuff. Not that there's many of those where but
the cacti.
yeah, the cactus. But as far as audiobooks, there's like nothing more satisfying than when you're like, I'm going to clean the whole house. I'm going to listen to an audiobook, because you clean and you listen to the story, and hours when you get done, you're like, my house feels so peaceful and it smells nice. And I just like finished this book. It's the best. I love that. So cleaning the house also, or driving. If you have a long drive, put an audiobook on.
Yeah. Or other times I like to listen to audiobooks include doing a puzzle. That's a lot of fun. And sometimes, I haven't done this in over a year and a half, but I cross stitch occasionally, and I like to listen while I cross stitch.
Yes, I love using everybody thinks this is a weird name, but the app Procreate on the iPad for art. I love doing art and then just listening to an audiobook. So even if the art, sometimes I'm like, well, this sucks, but at least I got to listen to a book.
Yeah. Okay, last question. What kind of books do you like to read?
Like
we already talked about this.
Yeah, when we introduce ourselves, we're like, I'm so-and-so, and I read this.
Yeah.
I'm just used to introducing myself that way, like to other bookish people. Like, this is what I am.
Basically.
So I think I'll add to beyond just genres, because a lot of us already answered that. Jessie mentioned briefly for herself, but I also like reading a mix of young adult and adults, and every now and then a middle grade. I love stories for all ages. I think there's great stories everywhere, and I'm not for anybody that's familiar with my channel, I am not one of those people that's like, well, but like, you're kidding yourself if you think that like that's good or that you should like this or something. Like, if you're not harming anybody else, read whatever you want. I really don't care.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, I read this year I've read more adult for sure. But usually it's kind of even. It's not that far off. It's not like I'm reading like 20% young adult and 80% adult. It's like 60-40 kind of. It just kind of varies. But I don't read a lot of middle grade either, just because anytime I almost always am just like, yeah, this is not for me. I don't like, I'm clearly not the target audience. And I have like my reading experience with it is like less than, and then I feel bad because I'm like, that doesn't mean it's a bad book. I'm 34 years old. I'm not in middle school.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel about like graphic novels and comic books. Like I read them and I'm like, okay, well that was a good story, but just the amount of enjoyment I get out of reading them isn't the same as the amount of enjoyment I get out of reading novels. So then I'm just like, I feel like for me, I'm like, why bother reading that when I know I'm going to have more fun reading this other thing? And it's, just preferences.
Yeah.
It's funny.
I also read a mix. Say that again?
It's funny you say that because I was going to say the kind of books that I want to start reading more of is like manga, graphic novels.
Full Metal
I mean, a
Alchemist.
lot of people really like them, so I'm not saying that you won't, but the way Jashana described feeling about middle grade is how I feel about comic books and graphic novels.
Makes sense.
I
Yeah.
think with anything, it depends on also, I mean, some stuff is just not for some people and that's totally okay. But I also think sometimes it depends on the story. Like I've tried some comics and I'm like, oh, this isn't really for me. And then other comics or manga that I'm like, oh, this is the best thing ever. So, I mean, that's why I was freaking out over Full Metal over there. Full Metal.
Yes.
So good.
I have it. I need to read it. Yes.
You have to give it, I feel like the first arc is like not my favorite, but then after that, it gets really emotional. Because at first it's kind of campy, like a lot of that kind of manga is. And then, so it's like kind of goofy and silly. And then you get to what I think is technically the second main like arc of the story. And you're like, what the heck? Like stuff starts happening that you're like, what? This got way darker than I was. Everybody who knows Full Metal knows what I'm talking about.
I'm excited.
Yeah, and the show is fantastic. So, although there are two, but I don't need to talk for like another hour. So.
I was just going to add that I also read a mix of YA and adult. I would say that it's been slowly shifting more adult, but it used to be pretty like 60-40, like 60 YA. Now I think it's more 50-50. I don't know. I've been reading a lot of adult this year, so we'll see how my end of the year stats add up. It might be more adult, which would be really interesting because it hasn't been that way for a while. And I don't read a lot of middle grade, but I want to. I have enjoyed middle grade a lot in the past, but there's been so many things I want to read.
Oh.
It was an outburst.
I know my husband just came home and the dogs are barking, but there's just so many things that I want to read that I haven't made time for middle grade. I read one this year and I was really happy I did that. And I want to read more. I want to revisit some of my like favorites when I was growing up. So maybe next year.
Yeah, and I think too, as far as for people that do read both young adult and adult, it's tough because while you might read more young adult books, page count wise or word count wise is probably a better way to put it. You might be actually equaling out more because usually young adult books are so much shorter. And I know like for myself, this year has been really tough and very demanding of my both physical and emotional self. So I feel like young adults those books were just easier to like take in, especially if I was binge reading, because I would start an adult book like Malice. I was wanting to read that alongside Jashana and Jessie, but then I was like, I can't read this right now because I know it would require so much of like paying attention to who's who so that you can enjoy all the intricacies and all that stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to pick up House of Dragons or whatever, like something that was a little faster and like just kind of more accessible.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it just depends on, I will say thanks to Jashana, I read The Queen of Blood. And that's a shorter, it is adult. I went and checked her website because it gets categorized as young adult a lot. And I was like, I think it's adult. Like in the second one, the main character is like a mom going through a divorce in a fantasy land. I'm like, I don't think this is
so interesting.
No way.
So anyway, so I've read the first two in that series and they're much shorter. So I think it's just tough because you get stuff like Stormlight. Wait, it's over here. It's hard. Stormlight is massive and something like Wheel of Time, which is so long. So I think sometimes it's just more of a commitment. And it's not really that it's more demanding of your, like, it's not like it requires more intelligence or anything. It's just, there's a lot of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, this isn't one of the questions, but you mentioned binge reading, Elle, and I know that you're kind of a binge reader sometimes. And I'm curious about the other two people because I am not a binge reader. And I've actually learned this a lot more so like this year. But I found that if I read a book too fast, that like I'm not getting max satisfaction out of it. Like I need to spread it out a little bit, you know? And that's been really interesting. So Elle and I, sometimes when we try to buddy read together, like it ends up being that she'll read it all in one go, which I, you know, obviously is totally fine. I don't want her to wait for me and impact her own enjoyment of it. But I'm usually the one who is like sending her messages after the fact that she's read it, because I'm always just like behind. But I have found that I don't like to binge read things. Like I don't want to read a book in a single weekend for some reason. I feel like that makes me really weird as like a book person, because I feel like most people want to like fully submerge themselves and read it really fast, you know? And I found that that's not how I like to read.
I think it depends. I'll add to, I'm so sorry. I know you're more asking Jessie and Shauna, but I'll add to, it depends on the book. Like there's like Queens of Innis Lear, which Jade and I buddy read. She finished that way before me. And I was like, it's
like the only time.
So there's some books that, or like Senlin Ascends is a book that I feel like you could take a long time to read. When I first started it, they all heard where I was like, this guy's so dumb. Like, I was like, what's happening? This book is so bizarre. But then like, I realized it was kind of intentional. And anyway, once you kind of recognize I think that affects how much I want to binge it. So like something like Ash Princess, which Sean, my husband, always calls Trash Princess. But that one I read like in a night. And I feel like I read, there's like Fireborn and House of Dragons. I read like really quick. But then there's other books that just take me forever to read. But that's because of kind of what you're saying, Jade, of like taking it all in. It's more of like, is this if it were to be adapted, would it be adapted to a show or a movie? If it's a movie, you kind of like soak it all in really quick, and then a show spread it out a little more. So it depends for me.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah, I would say I'm more of a binge reader than not. And I think that's more common with YA books. When I read YA, I read them a lot faster. They're just a little bit easier to digest. And more to the point. They're a little bit more of a page turner, but of course there's always exceptions. But yeah, like A Curse So Dark and Lonely, I read in like 2 days because I was just like, oh my god, that's so cute. So I would say I'm more binge reader, but it's interesting because I'm not a binge series reader, and I kind of want to change that about myself because it takes forever between books in a series to read them, and then I don't remember anything. This has happened with me with the Throne of Glass series. I should have just read them back to back, but I had to kind of wait for the paperbacks to come out, and that took a while. So it's just yeah. I think I want to be more of a binge series reader if I'm going to start picking up more series, because I've realized if I let too much time pass, it's just, I can't remember anything.
I'm pretty sure I'm in the middle of more than 30 series. It's like a consistent problem that I've had that I've been working on for like 2 years and I think I'm just getting worse. So I'm trying to work on that as well. But what's funny is when it comes to TV shows, I will totally binge TV shows. I can watch those in a weekend, like a whole season of something, but not books.
Yeah, I like to... So I like want to get back to binge reading series also, because I used to do that before BookTube. Like Throne of Glass, as you mentioned, like I read that before BookTube, and I like picked up the first book just randomly, and then I was like, I must read all of them that are available right now. And I went and bought I think the first 4 were out. And then of course I couldn't because I had to wait for them to come out. But like as soon as one would come out, I pre-ordered it, I got it, I read it. And then with the last book, I reread the entire series so that I could like binge read the whole series to get to the end. And that's what I'm going to do with the Legends of the First Empire too. I haven't read the final 2 books, so I'm just going to start over and read all 6 of them in a row. But yeah, I want to get back to doing that because that's how I prefer to read series that are completed or that have a couple books out. Of course, a lot of them, like, they've recently started and I have to wait for the books to be published. But if they are out, I want to do that.
I will add for some, I mean, you would think like, oh, okay, well, all the books are out, so I can binge read these. And I'm so stupid that I'm like, the new one's coming out? I can't wait. And then I will be more likely to finish a series as it's coming out, like I'll finish that series, and then books that all the books have been out for a long time. I don't know, like the excitement of the release isn't really there. Or maybe because you're forced to wait already, that you're like, well, now it's out. Like I can read it now. So
they're waiting for you whenever you're ready. So like it'll always be there.
It's so frustrating. And that's a habit I'm annoyed at myself for. Like The Curse of Dark and Lonely, because Jessie mentioned that. As soon as that comes out, I'm going to read the third one and then I'll be done with that trilogy. But then you've got like the Lunar Chronicles, and I still haven't read the last one.
They're so good.
I'm like, those have been out forever. And I put it on my TBR so many times and then just not picked it up. So yeah, I want to be better about if they're like, the Winnowing Flame series, I just read the first one, Ninth Reign, and enjoyed it so much. And then I'm like, I'm getting these next two. And I think part of the problem for me is that I like to try to plan my TBRs really far in advance. And then if I read something and I like it a lot, then I'm like, oh shoot, I didn't plan to read the next one because it was going to depend on whether I liked it. And then and then I end up not following through with the books I committed to read because I'm like, I'd rather read the next one of that.
Yeah, that's why I can't do TBRs. I'm way too much of a mood reader. But yeah, I wanted the Faithful and the Fallen. So we read Malice, like what, in August? July,
yeah.
And then I bought the freaking set and I've been like just sitting on it. But I was like, I need to do this because this series, I'm going to forget what the frick is going on. So I picked up Valor and I'm reading them like one after the other. But I don't sit and read a book in a day or in a weekend very often at all. Like that's super rare for me to do anymore. Literally, no matter what time of day it is or where I am, if I sit down to read, after 15 minutes, I'm like, I need a nap. I sleep. Like I get so tired when I'm reading, and I don't understand why. I'll be wide awake, and then I sit down, and I'm like, oh god, time for.
Yeah, I mean, I do find that like after like an hour of sitting and reading, I get antsy, and like I can't. I think that's part of the reason why I can't binge a book in a weekend, because like I need breaks in between. And it's weird because I did not used to be like that when I was a kid. I would read for hours and hours and hours, but now as an adult, I think that like, you know, I have a million to-do lists in my head, and if I sit down and read for a little while, then I start thinking about all these other things that I should be doing, like, you know, making videos or something, nothing really important, or cleaning the house. And I just can't sit. And it's not, I don't think I have like ADHD or anything, but like I have a hard time sitting and doing the same thing for like more than an hour.
I think too, if I get dressed, I'm like, well, I have to do something today that's not reading because I can read.
He is not getting dressed.
Yeah, I don't. Who gets dressed?
Who does that?
Is that the last question?
Yeah, we're done.
All right.
It's been about an hour, so.
Perfect. Well, thanks everybody for watching. We will have another video up very soon, so make sure you click the little bell notification so you get notified. We'll have links to some of our own individual videos and our individual channels down below. Be sure to check out the merch, and we'll see you guys later.
Bye.
Jessie.